Hello, and welcome to another episode of Super Pros Bros. I'm Player 1, Ike, and with me, as always, is...
Player 2, Eli, and, Brahmad. Did you know this podcast is available on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify?
I did not, Pinocchio. Are those the same places they could?
Like,
comment,
share,
and subscribe?
Yeah, it sure is.
Man, I am just taken aback. I can't believe that technology is available.
Just shocked. Completely bamboozled.
Well, if that bamboozles you, just wait till I tell you what we're going to talk about today.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are discussing what makes a good movie translation of anime or video games, or what leads it to not be such a good translation of a anime or video game.
Alright. From one visual medium to another.
Yes. From the kind of more tertiary visual mediums to the most commonly accessed one. Which I think is the reason why we see it go from one and not the other. Because it is kind of like the mountaintop of create. Very rarely do you create a movie and then something else good comes of it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Occasionally it's happened, but by and large, when you see a video game that has come from a movie, it's bad and it's just a cash grab.
Yeah.
But there are times where great film, it is the last form of artistic expression. It seems to be the kind of I don't want to say nail in a coffin because that makes it sound more
finalized,
cryptic than it needs to be. But it very much is. That is the last level of ascension.
It's one of the aspirational modalities.
It's the final hope and dream. It's kind of like 6 seasons in a movie. It's you go comic book, video game, or anime or cartoon into movie. That is that's the dream.
Sure.
So leading us off, do you have any thoughts on what makes a good version of a video game or anime series franchise into a film?
I do, actually. And I think...
Whoa!
I know, crazy. It's like, we're not prepared at all. One of the things I think that it can be done very, very well, and this goes for most any means, is really nailing your main character. And especially with another visual medium, one of the things that's very important is how they function, how they carry themselves. And I think a very good example of a really good portrayal is from the newer movie of Tomb Raider. Because the actress went through hell on her body to be able to pull off stunts that Lara Croft does, and she could, use climbing axes like Lara Croft does, and she made herself a fucking monster. I want to say her name is Alicia Vikanders. I'm gonna double check that.
We appreciate you, Alicia V. So, what is it about the portrayal of our main character as opposed to, say, side characters or the setting that really is important to kind of making a good, video game or anime movie, or at least paying deference? What is it about that in particular that pops?
Because the big thing is you spend most of your time, if you're playing, for example, playing Tomb Raider, you spend most of your time looking over the shoulder of Lara Croft. You spend most of the time listening to Lara Croft. So if you do not have a good primary main character, you've already severed one of the kind of emotional connections to your audience. If you've got the wrong tone of voice, if you've got the wrong look, the wrong movement, the wrong feel, you have already jaded your audience into disliking you. It feels wrong. It feels inauthentic because they have a source to draw from. Unlike if you're making a movie based off nothing, there isn't that kind of forced role because they don't have anything to base what the main character should be, quote unquote, off of anything. It's completely unique, it's completely novel. So they get to choose unbiased whether or not they like it. So by making something that has already been, or by recreating or reformatting something that already exists, you have to appease to their notions. And when you can do it right, it is really cool to watch. And yes, double checked, her name is Alicia Vikanders, and she absolutely
Yay.
nailed it.
Good job, Alicia. We appreciate you. So I have an interesting question to postulate here.
Sure.
When it comes to franchises that kind of want to take an alt take on an existing IP, how do you feel about that when it comes to portrayal of the main character? Like a while back, I talked about a pitch about doing Peter Pan, but where instead of Peter Pan is this, lovable rascal, he's a, serial killer or like a cult leader type.
If you could make it a hard enough difference, I think that's one of the things where you have to make it clear that you're very, 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 very different. You're not looking to recreate the kids' movie or anything close. Like, yeah. I feel like it's one of those things you've got to hard commit to being different. You can't half-ass it, or you get the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, you can't do 90% and then change one character
No.
a large amount, but the setting remains like everything is the same except for this like one glaring. It's kind of like the way you're talking about. I think it's last week you were talking about Batman v Superman. Like one of your biggest problems and gripes with the trailer and just the movie in general was the Lex Luthor portrayal by the great Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah.
Because where he's a great actor, his direction that he was given was so anti the character, but then the rest of the setting is the general mise-en-scène of the Batman v Superman story.
Yeah.
But then you have this glaring character that is exorbitantly alternate, even though the rest of it is seemingly the same.
Yeah. Like, it's wrong.
Sorry, didn't mean to bring it up. I just thought that was a good distinction.
All good.
While you, calm yourself down, get your breathing under control. Do you mind if I
work
go
off
next?
the shakes? Yeah. Please do. What's something else good that can go right?
For me, one of the most important tenets of anime, of video games by and large, is they have this medium where you can do wacky things, whether the story is wacky, the setting is wacky, the actions are wacky. It is such a playground, especially because depending upon what time period you're looking at, they were predominantly made for children, and so this idea of realism just doesn't exist. You don't need to be real because they don't know what reality looks like.
Sure.
So you're working on a fresh slate, so you can just do whatever.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really enjoy when taking an existing IP, especially one from such a, pardon the quasi-pun, cartoony background, is just embracing the wackiness. And they do this. A great example of this is in Speed Racer, the Wachowskis, all at 2000. I don't remember the year. The movie is hokey as shit, but it's well away. Like, there's a line said by the awesome John Goodman of just like after they fight off some ninjas, and he goes, it's Christina Ricci's character. It's like, were those ninjas? He goes, more like nanjas. Joke is hokey as shit. And that's the best part of it. And that's the best part of that movie is while there is some serious moments and you really do feel and care, there's a lot of it that is just like, yeah, this is based off a bananas cartoon that has been memeified to death. We're going to get the essence of it and have fun with it because that was kind of the point. Like, literally the main character's younger brother has a chimp sidekick that they do just weird side adventures constantly throughout every episode and are useless and just hilarious. That's the show. So instead of being like, instead of Christopher Nolaning up, which I do love, and there's a time and a place for that, I do think it is always great to not forget where you came from, so to speak, and just not everything has to be Christopher Nolan, Avengers Endgame level of serious. These came from cartoons that were meant for children, sometimes teaching lessons, sometimes not. Sometimes they were just meant to have fun. So to remember,
just amusement on Saturday morning.
Exactly. So to remember that, your beginnings when it comes to your IP and embrace that, I think is the best way to stay true to it tonally and appease the fans where maybe you're not going to do it with the story. Because sometimes the stories don't translate. We've seen, it was the Wolverine that came out in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. The movie sucked.
Yeah. But
But it was shot for shot on a comic, and it's one of those that just didn't translate for whatever reason. I haven't done a deep dive on that. Maybe I will. If you guys want to see us do a deep dive on that, send us an email asking to do it in the mailbag episode. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll do it on another episode.
Who knows?
Either which way, the point is that you're not always going to be able to appease the fans by telling the story they want, either canonically or the preferred version, especially now that there's so many different takes, especially when it comes to bigger IPs like Marvel. You're not going to be able to make everybody happy because there's favorite storylines, there's original storylines, yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
But if you go and look at the tonality of it, if you look at the kind of tentpole things of that IP and make sure that element in some fashion has been represented, I think that's a really good way of staying, in quotes, true without, keeping yourself locked into certain things that may or may not be good.
Yeah.
So, while the audience revels in my great word philandering there,
easy,
easy. I couldn't come up with a good transition. I needed to pass the ball. Your turn. How about that? Is that better?
Philandering is absolutely not the word you wanted, by the way. Floundering, maybe.
All matter of perspective.
Anyway,
balls in your court. What else do you think is a good thing, or one of the things to not forget or do when translating mediums?
I think something that's good to keep in mind is, especially as you're looking at making like fictional races and fictional species, that they have, for lack of a better term, themes to them. Like, if you're ever, this kills me, but like most of the time, if you're making a dragon, it should be big, it should be threatening, it should have a hoard of gold. Like, easy tenets to remember. And one of the ones that does it pretty well, as much as I do not like this movie for a number of other reasons, the World of Warcraft movie actually did a pretty damn good job representing orcs, I think. Because they're supposed to be this big, brutish species. These, gruff...
A Hulk smash equivalent.
Yeah. Like they're supposed to be rough, gruff. They're there to fight. Like they respect strength. They're there to fuck shit up. Like that's their whole purpose. They're this very warlike species for the most part. And we
learn our ABCs. They learn FUCKIT.
Yeah. They learn how to swing an axe. We learn how to write with a quill. And so they did a very good job translating that, like through CGI and motion capture, to making orcs feel big and threatening and imposing. And one of the things they do is one of the other characters is this really great human swordsman, and he just he fights straight once and just gets bodied. And he's just like, okay, time to be quicker than them, and just learns to be very nimble and crafty in how he fights. And so they do a good job keeping that authenticity, where it's not just like our main character human is suddenly stronger than orcs who are have 100 pounds on him. That just doesn't make sense. So yeah. They do a good job in terms of keeping the right kind of feel of combat between human and orc, and keeping the right feel of orc, with the one glaring exception being Gul'dan, because the voice actor they got for him was just so terrible. God, everyone else, it sounds right, it's gruff, and if you go back and play Warcraft and you watch the movie, the voices don't sound bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, with what one exception of voice acting choice, the rest of it feels good. It feels right. Which I think
another thing that you're talking about there that I think is a really good important thing to remember is having not only having, I think it's a really good power dynamic system to make sure that you don't have that you keep your power ceiling, is have everybody have lanes in which they excel.
Yeah,
it makes it more dynamic, makes confrontations more interesting. But also having characters move, one of the things similar to WoW is Lord of the Rings, in that if you watch each of the races move, dwarves amble, elves glide. Yeah. Orcs basically are just in a running stomp constantly. And so each of those having different moving characteristics is one of those things that's kind of color coding your characters. This one is movement coding your characters, where you see what each character is, and it helps you remind you of a more important thing about themselves, even though you don't it's a subconscious thing that your brain is informing you of. And I think that is just one of those things that, showing differences and not excellence necessarily, but just having them be different enough. So you're not constantly being confused, especially if you can make characters kind of look the same, but if they move different, if they talk different, if they fight different, it does help remind you, because you can look, if you were paying attention enough, and I think it's one of those things you'd notice if, you weren't paying attention, then I asked you, it would be one of those things that you just subconsciously picked up on. But the fighting styles between the two orcs in Lord of the Rings, sorry to be moving away from your IP, is that they fight different. The ones that Sauron has and the one that Saruman have fight different. One of them is this kind of old, scrabbly, just gooey evil, and then the ones that Sauron made are basically like Marines. They are very well trained. They move a lot more efficiently.
You're mixing up your factions, by the way. Saruman has the Uruk-hai, which are like the Marines, and they're better trained.
Isn't that what I just said?
No, you said Sauron.
Alright, yeah. Sauron's got the old icky boys. Saruman has the Uruk-hai, which are like the new Marine ones.
Yeah.
You get it right that time? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, having that be there is one of those things, because they are essentially, as far as most viewers are concerned, basically the same, but being able to differentiate them, especially when they have the fight in Two Towers, is it helps the audience not be confused.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just overall gives a better feel to it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Speaking of things that are easier to see and understand, for the last pick in my what makes a conversion of an animated or video game medium to the big screen or live action is translation of action, which is something that Rurouni Kenshin showcased really well. And it's not easy, and I think that one of the reasons this one works as well, and one of the kind of pitfalls is that in a lot of these, the action is something that you cannot wrap your mind around as a person. But in an animated medium, you can kind of get away with anything.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't look like anything, then what do we know to make it look like?
Yeah.
In Rurouni Kenshin, one of the reasons I think it was a good choice to make it live action is because it's based on a swordsman. He's doing cool shit, but he's not doing fantastical shit. So it's something that, as human beings, we know what's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So when translating it to the big screen, it's a lot easier to conceptualize. I think one of the areas, and the reason this is last on the list, is because it runs a fine line. With certain things like Rurouni Kenshin, it's super easy. You have sword fights, and you amp it up a little bit.
Sure.
I think Blood Plus is another one that is a relatively it's faster paced.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more foreign because you have vampires fighting each other at that point. But it's still this kinetic fighting style. You're punching, you're grabbing, you're scratching, you're ripping.
Yeah.
It's all things that we can see and understand.
Sure.
The dangerous one is when you start getting into what's going to be our next pick, when it's something that is
fantastical.
A lot more fantastical, yeah. And it's a lot less of one of those things that we can clearly show. It's a lot less kinetic and a lot more whoa.
Yeah.
Just mystical. If that's not a good enough tee up, I don't know what is.
Yeah. That does drag us to what we have to talk about. It would be a crime to not bring it up. We got to talk about when action looks really bad, and when you try to be fantastic and you just smash your face into the wall. Because Avatar: Last Airbender is the travesty and apostasy. It's truly a war crime of a film. And if you watch it, and the difference between the show is unbound by normal physics, right? And so you can have Aang flying around on an air scooter, you can have him do the Godzilla fish, and smack ships around, and it's easy because, you just have to draw it. Right? Well, easy, quote unquote. But you can't do that in real life. But you can get kind of close with CGI, and this did a cardinal sin and didn't. It was nowhere close. Yeah. They spend and the problem is too, they spend so much energy and effort to do seemingly little, and it's almost boring to watch, which is agonizing.
Yeah, because like in the show, one of the coolest things is bending. It's so, especially when it's so smooth because and which like kind of fits with the with the way they show it in this story.
A large part of the
right?
reason it's so smooth looking and why it feels so good is because it's based on something. The bending in Avatar, the show, is all based on Tai Chi forms.
Oh, interesting. I didn't put that together.
Yes. It's so the reason it looks so coherent is because it is based in something. It has actual founding principles.
Oh, wild. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
now that you say that, I can totally see it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You just don't think about it, but that's why it feels so fluid and so. I'm not gonna say relaxing isn't necessarily the right word, but yeah, it looks so put together. It never it seems like it obeys its own set of rules, and that's because it does.
Mm-hmm.
And by design, and the live action, it doesn't, and it doesn't have the same rewarding payoff.
Yeah, but that's more what I was pointing to, is that the showing of the bending is a lot more fluid, even when it's not water. The fire, the way it's coming out and being pushed into existence,
Yeah.
it's a lot more fluid. It's a lot the pacing and the showcasing of it is a lot less slow. I think that was like one of the biggest things, is that for me at least in that show, and like one of the reasons it didn't work is that instead of having this quick action-paced fight sequences, you had these holy fuck, not to go on another Avatar tirade, but like Dorka, since we're here, it is just so slow when they're doing earth bending, and they're just like shoving what looks like a pebble.
I have 3 guys spitting up and like break dancing to throw a rock. It's
a rock slowly.
Ugh. It's like you could rig up a catapult in that time. Like, goddamn. Yeah. It's bad. It's
bad.
It is terrible.
But I mean, that would be true of, if they made a trying to think of like a good, like if they like the kind of weird thing. And like, to take a different side of this, one of the ones where it looks good is if I don't know about the new one because I haven't seen it, though I mostly heard good things. But the original Mortal Kombat movie, not a great movie, kind of a fun time.
It's a bit goofy.
But one of the things it shows well is when Sub-Zero's fighting, he shoots ice balls quickly. They have velocity. Yeah. They move. They are an imminent threat, and they look dope. That is like the flip reverse of the Avatar problem is amongst all the others.
Yeah.
Is that for the fighting sequences, the way it's shown is just so slow that there's no tension. You can't even be afraid, even if it's going to hurt them. It doesn't look like it's going to hurt them. So it's either it's going to dodge and it took forever, or it hits them and then they take so much damage that it doesn't look like they should have.
It's committing the cardinal sin of being boring.
Yep.
Yeah. Like,
and not convincing you of the stake of the action.
Yeah.
Because what they're trying to relay is this energy, this weight, this dread potential, and it just conveys none of that.
Yeah, it's meant to be powerful and otherworldly, and it's just banal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't have a good transition. What's next on the list? I can't make it just work.
So one of the things, and I think this is a good follow-up, because one of the problems we had with one of the most important things that we're just talking about is that, it didn't look right. It didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And the same kind of problem was there was in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a smattering of old-timey cartoon translations to films,
action. Yeah.
to live action. And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek, hey, let's get the boomers out to see this, and we'll kind of make a lot of funny nods.
Sure.
We're going to leave those aside because I think those kind of play poorly with storytelling by and large, like this whole fan service in a film element.
Yeah,
but
it's not good if that's the primary driver.
Yeah, if that's like this is how we'll make money. But one of the things about like Fat Albert, Rocky and Bullwinkle is that, which are the ones that I'm going to kind of focus on as examples of this, is that they just don't look right because they're coming from such a old school 2D version and they're trying to make them now.
Mm.
And it's just like, one, the time in which these were made, just the physical appearance was so much different. Like, even if they made a movie back when they were making these, Rocky and Bullwinkle, I think was like 30s or something like that. When it originally came out, it was in black and white. It was a 10-minute cartoon or something like that.
Yeah.
It's something our parents watched growing up. Fat Albert came out in, like, I want to say the 70s. And so just the visual aesthetic of these just doesn't translate to a live action now.
Yeah.
And then also they're putting them in our environment. And so there's so much hokey displacement.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make them look real. Like, if you look at the poster of Fat Albert, it just looks uncanny valley to, like, a weird maximum. Mm-hmm. Not in that, like, they don't look like the real people. It just looks like a very good but not professional cosplay, like, for like a 70s theme. And it feels so out of place. It's neither old retro and it's neither current, and you can't make it current and keep its vibe because it is very much from the time in which it was created.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like one of those like really weird, I don't know how to like necessarily fix that other than maybe set them in the place they were,
set or just appropriate time setting, if nothing else.
And or just don't.
It's always an option.
But yeah, it's one of those things. Just kind of like the bending in Avatar. It don't look right.
Something right.
It's very important, especially with things that are so much visual spectacle, or in this case, visual representation with older films, is that they really do need to look right. And it is, it is a hard task to ask to thread a needle of both keeping it current or, making it like it came out today and not like trying to like retro it too hard. And at the same time, keeping the feel and the vibe of that time period that it came from.
For sure.
So I don't know the fix for that, but that is definitely one of those things that it always comes across as hokey, pandering, and just out of place.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are out of place,
nice.
Yeah, bit hackneyed, but we'll roll with it. There's always a danger making video games into a movie, and that's in large part because you remove one element of engagement, and that's playing it, right? Because you don't play the movie, so what are you
talking about? You put it in the DVD tray?
Shut the hell up. You know what I mean.
I regret nothing.
You should, but that's besides the point. And so one of those things you have to be willing to do is find a way to ensure engagement. Like, I think video game movies especially don't have time to be boring. Because you kind of come into this expectation of things to be... Kinetic's not the right word, but there's supposed to be kind of a lot going on, just because that is your expectation. And so the worst thing you can do is make things kind of muted. And a miserable offender of this principle is the older Resident Evil movies. Man, they just... Not only did they lose, like, the gameplay kind of element, and, like, you don't have that kind of over-the-shoulder feel of following around, like, Jill Valentine or somebody. But they do another terrible sin, and they take more of that immersion away from you by just doing... They could have done a really good job with, like, tension created with music, and they do a lousy job of that. They don't use auditory engagement well. And so, knowing what Resident Evil is supposed to be, again, having that comparative metric, you just go, wow, bored out of my damn skull.
Mm-hmm.
And
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're not necessarily saying, do a third person, like, constant shot to the movie, but so much as between either angle or, shot composition or music, kind of try to recreate the setting that the game is so known for, especially in, like, horror.
Yes, absolutely. And this is especially present in horror settings, in from like horror games or horror mediums, that you really need to find a way to keep that engagement and keep that tension kind of omnipresent. Like if you look at really good horror movies, they're really good about keeping you on the edge of your seat, keeping like hair on the back of your neck raised up, and like they don't have to do a whole lot, but they use really clever auditory cueing and really good use of like music and fade in, fade out, and little noises, and just it's those little things. And if you don't do that, again, it's especially exacerbated if you have that comparative measurement to go off of, you lose so much of your audience's engagement. It's one of those places where, again, because it's a known quantity, I have expectations for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of doubling down because, especially with the most recent Resident Evil show, don't try to be too smart if you're making a game. Like, video games aren't always known for having super in-depth or super creative stories. Like, one of the best games ever, a little bit of a tangent, one of the best regarded video games ever is Half-Life 2. 90% of that game is you trying to go from point A to point B and just kind of getting interrupted.
Yep.
It's not a complicated story. It's really fucking straightforward. Don't try to complicate things. Use what you've been given. Like, Resident Evil has made this great terrorist organization, essentially, with Umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they're just like, no, we gotta introduce ulterior motives. No, be simple. Don't complicate shit.
Especially when it's, that one's also like an action horror movie.
Yeah.
So you've got so much visual spectacle. It's like you already kind of you probably want as little story as possible so that you get to have as much action as you can.
Like, don't use, simple is not bad. Like, simple is, you've got to make simple good, like, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, simple is not inherently a flaw. Don't make it one. Like, just play to what works. Play to your strengths. Stay in your lane. Christ, how hard is this?
All right, Grandpa.
Sorry.
If I take the last
Please do. I got a little heated there.
A little wound up.
Yeah.
All right, last on this before we close this chapter and send it to break. We're talking about just kind of on a bit of a flip of the first one we were talking about when you were talking about making sure to kind of stay true to your main or very important characters.
Yeah.
Is also the same thing with this one, which is instead of a lot of mistakes that companies do when creating something is they disrespect the source material, not necessarily canonically, but tonally. So the example that is most recent that people can kind of connect to and has been talked about ad nauseum, and we're going to continue to talk about, is the new Cowboy Bebop.
Lord have mercy.
Which, while visually is
fine,
like, it looks like it should fit the part.
Yeah.
Like, in most visual shots leading up into the last episode, then Jesus fuck me in the face. It looks like it should fit the part, but the way the characters interact, it's just these characters are all wrong, but the world is all right.
Yeah.
In quotes. So you have very much these characters that should be not should be, but historically and contextually, and like were this one way, and you're changing it because you feel like it, not because it's called for, not because it's necessary. Like, as a longtime lover of Cowboy Bebop, these characters would have played just fine the way they were. Instead, don't know why it feels like, I don't know about you, but from what I've seen of it, what I could force myself to stomach, just so many of the characters are changed. Instead of, like, one of the tent poles of Jet's character is that he is very calm.
Yeah.
He never, like, he'll fuck you up. Like, he has no problem, like, pimp slapping a bitch. Man, woman, animal. He will fucking take you to task with that metal arm.
Yes.
And send you straight to hell. But he's gonna do it with a lot of measure.
He doesn't lash out.
Yeah, he doesn't lash out. He doesn't get angry at he never like raises his voice at something.
He will be stern
because he's pissed off.
But yeah,
yes,
he does not go like blind rage, go bananas. No, that's.
And I think in the first episode, I don't think it's the first shot, but I think it's in the first episode. There's like this, we have to do this. Like he's effectively doing the equivalent of like going to the gas station.
Yeah.
And like this machine's talking to him, and he's like raising his voice and getting pissed. And it's like, what? That isn't what that character was.
Yeah.
Then you have Faye being the smartest of the three, which at times she was, but by and large she wasn't. She was the fox of the three, and I don't mean that in a sexual sense. I mean that in a
she's like
brain sense.
She's like
she was
trickster.
very she was sly, cunning, like very much duplicitous.
Yeah, she was a social manipulator.
Yeah. That's no slight against her character. I think that makes a great character.
No, and like I mean, she very much used like feminine wiles to get an edge, like that. No,
she used feminine wiles, but also I mean
that wasn't the extent of her toolkit.
Yeah,
but like it absolutely was a tool in her toolkit.
Yeah, and in this one, she's almost taking Jet's place, and being very level-headed, calling people out on being stupid, where that was kind of Jet's role.
Yeah.
Then you have John Cho playing Spike, and there's elements of the cool, but not really that much. The interaction, there's so many things they brought the visual, and then they left the character study and the writing at home, which I think is like one of the major problems of this one, and something to very much, a lesson to be learned to not do when creating things further.
The fact that you could make Spike Spiegel and have him be like stoic and somber hurts me in a deep way. Like that's just wrong.
It would be like having the Joker, except he never laughs.
Yes, like
who is this character?
That'd be like having Spider-Man not making quippy jokes. Like it's wrong. Yeah. It just fuck off. Like I kind of like it. Get rid of it.
Yeah. He's got to be a teenage kid who's a smart aleck. Spike has to be a guy esteeming to be this Zen mystic, but also is a hothead who likes like taking the piss. It's like that is like very important to his character.
He's so aloof and always having a gas. Like violence is a fun time activity for him. Like just
whooping ass is him winding down.
Yeah. Also, let's not get started on Ed. That's too deep a well for me to go down. Good
well, before
Lord.
we jump down any wells that we can't find time to get ourselves out of, I think it's time we send ourselves to our commercial break.
Do you enjoy glorifying serial killers and worshiping crime in all its forms? What? No, of course not. But do you? Don't worry. You're not alone. There are tons of people who get a thrill hearing about the horrible, wacky, and sadistic things that the worst of us will do to one another. And thanks to the forced incarceration of the world during COVID, the desire for true crime documentaries has only ballooned into a social phenomenon rivaled only by the MCU. And whether you want to look at crimes gone wrong, bank robberies gone sideways, or just some of the truly awful and twisted and sadistic things from the minds of Ted Bundy and the like, you can be sure that you'll find someone to narrate it at you in a pace that is just too slow for normal conversation. What are you waiting for? Find your correct criminal today.
Welcome back, folks. Thank you for sticking around.
We appreciate you.
Speaking of things we appreciate, I've come to... I feel like I've heard about this before, but it just came back into my mind. So, sadly, I don't have a pitch this week. I have been moving from one living arrangement to another. I am now in a shoebox of an apartment, but it's a lot cheaper, so yay! However, in doing so, didn't really have time to write or think about anything like that. I was too busy schlepping boxes.
It happens.
And or having fun schlep boxes. But one of the things I did recall, and something I'm going to try moving forward, is a writing approach I heard a la David Lynch
Mm,
in his Cuckoo Awesome Noggin, which
okay.
is a movie is just a series of scenes. And that the way he likes to write his is he takes note cards, will write a scene on a note card,
Yeah.
and then when he has 42 that he can line up or some number about like that, then he's got his movie.
Mm,
And so it sounds like a very interesting form of outlining, where instead of doing it like a top-down breakdown, you do it like scene by scene, and then
yeah.
like you kind of reverse engineer a puzzle that is your, your picture, if you will. So that's my
Hmm.
my stand-in for a, writing thing this week, is a
Interesting.
bit of writing knowledge I've ascertained by the great madman that is David Lynch. I will keep you all posted on how and if that works.
So I have my newest character experiment to be talking about. That is a character I'm just calling Ambition, because
Is he ambitious?
she is actually. And at least I'm currently fielding it. It's a woman. I don't know. We'll see. That's less important. So my kind of thought behind them, and there is, if you're willing to gamble out your life, what can you go for?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, odds are bad, but if you're willing to just not care, or even if you were someone who wanted to go and just didn't care, like complete disregard, no sense of self-preservation, and they're just like, oh, sun's too hot, gonna melt the wings, don't care, we're flying high. What does that look like? And how well can you skirt around expectations of people because they assume you'll balk?
Mm.
And so my thought is that this would be one of the primary antagonists if and when I write the sequel to my web serial. Because they see a void of the Trillidan as a void they can fill. Because they've been given the tools in the material to make people adapted. All they have to do is unlock it. And so if there's a complete disregard for their life or anyone else's, what can they accomplish with it? Just through sheer social manipulation, force of will, and material. And who's willing to follow even though they know it's a terrible gamble? Because other people look at what they're doing and go, you're going to get us all killed. They go, but it might work.
Like, what if we didn't, though?
Yeah. Because my running thought is that the stake is essentially the adapted are supposed to die out after one generation. And that was kind of the agreement that they made to keep their powers. Because no one's supposed to have this yet. Like, it's too far advanced for any current sentient species. And so Ambition says, fuck that. I have, X years till I die, and I have the keys to the kingdom at my fingertips. I just need to pick it's all behind this door. I just need to pick the lock. Mm-hmm. And then the universe is mine to take. Because if we could beat the Trillidan, who's going to beat us?
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they know that the creators of the stuff are watching, to just to make sure. And so it's like,
just keeping an eye on.
Yeah, just because we put this super weapon on this planet, we're going to make sure it doesn't wander off. And just like, they'll kill us. Like, they can just gas the planet and we'll die and we'll never see it coming. And they go, yeah, but maybe. It's a risk they're willing to take.
Yeah.
So that has been my fun character or thought experiment for an antagonist. It's just wild.
That's a really cool
ambition.
one, because there's a lot of like basis in reality on that, and like you can look at, there are some celebrities that have just don't care who they hurt, went for big air and got it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like comparative through lines and kind of images that you can look at for like what would that look like, sound like, not necessarily like making the character after this person, but looking at the way they talk, the actions they do, decisions that they've made. There's a lot of bad examples that will give you good character traits for you to kind of make this awesome villain.
Modern day Lex Luthor, Jeff Bezos, is that you? No.
It's got the noggin for it.
It really does. Like, all he needs is a big green rock in the background on like a mantelpiece. Then I'm sold. I'm convinced. What have you got to recommend to the people today?
Well, since we were talking about video game and anime portrayals in film, I thought I would take a page from that book, and I've got a oldie but a, in quotes, goodie but not goodie, which is Street Fighter. We got Jean-Claude Van Damme as Guile,
Oh Lord,
which is a shit show because it's Jean-Claude Van Damme. So visually it looks right, but also it looks wrong as shit.
Yeah.
More importantly, and the reason I'm really recommending it, is we've got Raul Julia doing his last role as M. Bison and just getting it.
Excellent.
Oh, he did it as a cash grab because he, at the time, I believe he had
Gambling.
I don't remember.
What?
No, he had cancer. He died after this movie.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a very sad, a bit of a sad backstory, but he really gave it his all and proved why Raul Julia is just one of the OGs. Random aside, I saw a bit where he was acting alongside Meryl Streep on an off-Broadway play of The Taming of the Shrew. Whatever you think about that, it isn't the most well-aged piece of Shakespeare. It's got, chauvinist overtones, whatever.
Sure.
Meryl Streep is a badass bitch when it comes to acting. There are very few that are in her echelon.
Yep.
You can see this by the fact that I believe she has 3 Oscars. Like, this woman don't play. She just acts her ass off. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's Meryl fucking Streep.
She said literally in person, and you can see it, and other people were saying it about her, and you can see it in the clips that they show, that Raul Julia is a match for her because he is such a good actor. He really is. Like, he really does match her. And you can also see it in a weird way in, his last performance in Street Fighter as M. Bison, where he just goes all out because he realizes the circumstance, has basically nothing to lose, was doing it for the paycheck, but also is an actor through and through, so he's not gonna
go half-assed.
Fuck no. He goes full ass. Gives us the moon, baby. Best line in arguably cheesy movie history is his line as M. Bison, which is he's talking to, I believe, that Chung-Li, and she's giving him the rundown of like, you did this to me, you piece of shit, like I'm gonna get my the Inigo Montoya speech equivalent.
Sure. And
he goes, for you that day was the worst day of your life, blah 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 blah. For me it was Tuesday. Just like, damn. Just like, for me it was Tuesday. It's just like, it's so camp, and at the same time encapsulates what the character means is trying to say.
I
and it's
don't
just like,
give a fuck.
Yeah, this is what I do, girl. I fucking kill people. So, yeah, I killed your family, but also, I killed a lot of families. You might need to be a little bit more specific. But without getting into all the weeds, he says it so succinctly and simply. The movie is mediocre. It's a B movie. But when Raul Julia's on stream, baby, like, A+. If you can find a supercut of just him in that movie, you can just watch that and not watch the rest of it. But aside from that, just watch it, drink some, and then turn up the volume when he's on screen. You'll know when he's on screen, you'll feel it. I guarantee it.
Just wait.
What about you, Broskinkowski? What do you got to...
So I have a very bizarre and chaotic new show that started coming out called Little Demon. Where the main character is a girl who is the unwitting daughter of Satan. And
as you do.
And of course, Danny DeVito's the devil.
Like in real life.
Exactly. I think in real life he's actually like a wonderful human being, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, missing the point.
But it is it kind of puts me in mind of somewhere between like Super Jail and Rick and Morty. It's
That's
just
a pretty good place to be.
it's just bananas. Like one of the best parts is like the first episode. The mom is this crazy witch, like I, witch feels somewhere between like witch and a paladin. And so she's like prepping her body to pass to the ethereal realm, and her neighbor is the oh yeah, she's kind of that stepmom down the road. Yes, like runs a book club, drinks wine every other Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like, and she's just watching this chick strip down, like put like lamb's blood on her body and like draw this circle of salt, and she's just not saying a word about it. And her comment is like, "Wow, you're jacked, like prison jacked." It's just this bizarre disregard for gore and violence everywhere. like she puts like this like bones of a small bird in a condom and swallows it. She's like, "What, lambskin? What are you, a druid?" Like that's the takeaway.
Yeah, that's what you're picking up.
Yeah, like
that's
of
great.
all things, like what? Yeah, so it's absolutely bananas, and it's just so bizarre that if you're down to clown, very enjoyable. I've had a gas at like the 3 episodes that are out, but it's absolutely batshit. It's probably the best part.
That's rad.
I think the mom is voiced by Aubrey Plaza.
Yes.
Yeah.
That I know for sure.
Okay.
The mom is voiced by Abby Plaza.
Yeah, it ends up being kind of an interesting dynamic where like the kid wants to be normal and is like doing the delegating between divorced parents, and both feel a weird sense of like entitlement to the child and almost disregard
just
the
like real
child.
life.
Yeah, so it has like that kind of like, that's probably the realest part of it is that dynamic. So drama. Anyway, you have any
Drama bomb.
you have any musical recommendations for people this week?
I do.
What you
This
got?
one is an earworm of very little substance, but just fun
Yeah.
times. I did that sound effect for a very good reason. Part of the reason this won't get out of my head is there's a lot of clapping and it's really well synced. And I don't mean like it just the timing of it. It just makes it poppy. I'm a huge sucker for clapping in a song
Yeah.
where it works, which is such a weird thing to say.
Mm.
But Sharks by Imagine Dragons is just poppy goodness. I don't think there's any particular substance to it. Big fan of Imagine Dragons. I like playing their stuff. This is definitely some cotton candy variety Imagine Dragons, not like
Sweet Sucrose.
Enemy or, any of their other like big bangers,
Yeah.
like
Radioactive.
Roots or yeah. Those are great, but in a different echelon. This is very much just like light, fun.
Yep.
Not like party music, but it's just like kind of just like it's something you would turn up and sing loud with a friend while on a road trip. Like
Sure.
that's like the perfect circumstance for this
Sure.
song. What about you, bro? What is
Sort of in the same genre. I have my playlist on shuffle kicked up a song that I found years ago on the radio called Molotov Girls by the Zoblas, and it's the same kind of ish thing. It's a bit of a bop, but it's very much like
it's my bop.
yeah, it's not super special. There's nothing about it that's tremendously noteworthy. It doesn't have some crazy heavy hitting message. No, it's fucking fun. It's just fun to sing loud and jam out a bit too.
Yep.
Fairly poppy. A bit cotton candy. Maybe like a little more solid taffy.
Sure.
It's the airheads of music. But yeah,
It's I too. The second my co-host recommended this, or put this down while we were creating our show notes. Heads up, this isn't all just coming off the cuff. There's a lot of this that we do plan ahead. Not to show the man behind the curtain, but the second he said this, I was like, "Is that the?" He goes, "Yeah, that's the one." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool."
as a matter of fact. Right.
Well, as we come to a close, just a reminder for you listeners out there. mailbag episode, assuming we get enough info and questions.
Enough mail in the
is-
bag.
Yeah. Is the episode after next. So please send any and all questions, topics, or, elephant feces to superprosbros@gmail.com. superprosebros@gmail.com. You know that you can send, not like electronically, but you can order,
I know you can order
elephant
bags of
shit in a
Yeah.
no, in a can.
I did not know you could order elephant shit.
Yeah, like a canned elephant shit. Yeah, it's fucking strange. It's mostly a gag gift, but the thing is that when you order it and send it to somebody, it isn't like a can that says elephant shit and isn't. It's a can of elephant shit. I don't know why that's a thing, but I kind of love it. It makes me happy. The internet is like,
okay, internet. Yeah. Don't change, I guess.
And with that fun little tidbit, we are now truly at the end. So thank you for tuning in, and if you enjoyed, please feel free to
like,
comment,
share,
and subscribe.
And don't forget, there's new episodes of Super Pros Bros that come out the first and third Saturday of every month.
Bye.